Okay, so welcome and good morning, everyone. This session is called Effective Grant Writing and Beyond. My name is Katie Schock, and I am a professional grant writer and consultant. A little introduction to me. I am a dual discipline grants and development professional. I have over 15 years of expertise serving local foundations and a variety of nonprofit organizations ranging from human services to intellectual disabilities and to the arts. I have worked for local and regional organizations to help raise funds and build sustainable development plans. I have a BS degree in political science, pre-law from Ohio University. I am currently a voting member on the Bible to School Board, and I have served for 4 years now as an executive director of one of the top family foundations in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I say all this because my experience has kind of afforded me the opportunity to not only build years of experience in writing concise, precise applications to foundations on a local, state, and federal level, but I have now had the opportunity to be on the other side of the table, serving as an executive director to really see what the boards look for in the applications that are submitted and how they decide to fund certain organizations. And I hope to be able to share a little bit of my knowledge with you today. So why is this session important? I want you to be able to write a clear, effective, persuasive grant application to tell your story. And ultimately what that's going to do is it's going to bring more dollars to your nonprofit organization. And an interesting fact that I often tell my clients when I begin working with them is that besides individual donor cultivation, which should be your number one priority with raising dollars, grant writing is a close second. And that's not often the case in maybe some smaller or medium-sized nonprofit organizations. There's a lot of resources and energy and staff time that's put into planning these wonderful events, and maybe some mailing campaigns. But your best return on investment for your nonprofit organization is going to be taking some time and using some resources to really build a successful grant writing program. So before we jump into a lot of details, I just wanted to break the ice a little bit. So these are answers to grant proposals if nonprofits were brutally honest with funders. So the first question is, how will you use the funds if you receive this grant? Answer, we honestly really need this grant to pay for rent and utilities and for wages so our staff can do important work and feed their families. But since you won't allow your funds to be used for those things, we will say that your grant is paying for whatever you will actually fund. And then get other funders or donors to give and then tell them that their money is paying for the stuff that they want to fund. We will ultimately waste hundreds of hours every year trying to figure out who is paying for what, hours that could be used to deliver services. Please send unrestricted money. And hopefully some of you are chuckling at this because isn't this just the summary of a nonprofit organization? We would love to be able to find funding opportunities that would pay for our rent and our utilities and our wages. And it's often the hardest place to find money. I look back on my career and really this idea of unrestricted money shifted when the market fell in 2008, really. And as foundations lost lots of money in the marketplace, they really honed in on what they would fund, and it became very programmatic and direct services. So unfortunately, this is the nature of which we have to work within, but I hope you can find a little bit of humor in this question. The next one is, what is the leadership structure at your organization? Answer, because of understaffing, our ED is trying to handle too many things all at once and is thus stretched too thin. Our board actively undermines or micromanages the staff. The people who the person who is helping to hold this whole thing together is our operations director, Lydia, but she's being laid off because no one wants to fund operations or admin or fundraising. Please send money so we can buy Lydia a cake. I have a job because of this actual situation. So more often than not, the reason why I'm hired as a consultant or a contract grant writer is because the ED is working in so many areas of your nonprofit, and they have their hands in everything, and they are just stretched too thin. I've often said grant writing is not rocket science. There are some skill and some techniques that we can use, but oftentimes it's just time consuming. So again, for those that have the ability to pour some resources into hiring someone internally to write your grants, or working with someone in my capacity as a consultant, it really is going to be your best return on investment as you move forward with raising dollars. So let's jump into our agenda. I was asked today to just talk about grant writing, but I want to focus on a couple areas on an application where I find from a consultant standpoint that my clients tend to struggle with, but also from an ED position on a foundation that I often get a lot of confusion from when applications are submitted. So this is going to be about effective grant writing concepts and technical skills. Why is the who important? What is your community need? Why is your community need important? And then the how. This is the creating goals and your measurable outcomes for your organization. So why is the who important? Typically in an application, the who is answered in questions such as, what is your mission statement? What is your vision? Your location? Maybe it's under organizational services or history. And why these questions are important is because a lot of times we have the habit of maybe just copying and pasting what we have as our mission statement. We might just type in the counties of where we're located, copying, pasting our services from our website. And that's all fine. But I want you to consider maybe 3 different techniques when you're answering these questions moving forward. I want you to think about duplication of services. I want you to think about your uniqueness. And then I want you to think about the foundation you're actually targeting. So, speaking to duplication, funders are concerned about duplication of services. They want to know why they should pick you to fund as opposed to a different organization with the same mission. And I'm going to give you an example. I live in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And we are blessed with just so many opportunities to receive food for food insecurity. So I get a ton of applications on a quarterly basis from food hubs. And our board has to sit down and decide which food hub are we going to fund? And that can be kind of difficult. How do we know which one is going to be the most effective? How do we know we're spending our money in the right place? Is this the right food hub versus this other organization that delivers food? And so this is where your uniqueness comes into play when you're talking about your mission and your vision and your services. So what is your organization doing that is different from the same organizations that might have the same mission or services? What best practices are you following? Are you modeling your services off a regional or national organization that is already successful? Are you following those same practices? And then what are your accomplishments? What have you done over the past couple of years that are unique and different from any other organization serving that same population? And so I challenge you to try to revisit these sections of applications and incorporate these 2 things, acknowledging that there may be organizations in your area that do similar work, that serve the similar population. But then identifying what your uniqueness is when you answer these questions, so your application stands out above all the others. Speaking to standing out, What's also really important that you need to understand before you submit an application is the foundation that you're actually targeting. And it might not be a foundation, it could also be state grants and also federal opportunities as well. What is your area of focus? And does the foundation fund only your area of focus or a broader spectrum? Now, this is important because particularly for state and federal applications, most of the applications that are coming in all have the same area of focus. They may even have similar missions and similar services. So from a state and federal perspective, it's usually a very narrow area of focus. So your duplication of services and uniqueness is that much more important on who you are when you answer these types of questions on an application. So making sure that you are clear on what you are doing different, but also acknowledging that there are other people in your area providing the same services. So identifying, are you working with a particular subgroup within the same population that's different than everybody else, right? This technique might be a little different if you're approaching a foundation that has a broader spectrum of things that they fund. Now, duplication and uniqueness is just as important, but it may not need to be so highlighted and focused in those questions because they are supporting a broader spectrum of opportunities. So maybe healthcare, the arts, and education. Still important techniques to try to pull into these questions, but understanding who you're applying to will help you cater to these two different areas. And just very quickly, I want to touch on, I'm sure many of you already know, but a good way to target foundations is to use search engines that are available online. The three that I would recommend are Grant Hub, Foundation Center, and Instrumental. They all have free access to them with like limited information that they'll provide you if you just want to kind of test all three of those and see which one you like the best. But they all have subscriptions. So I highly recommend you subscribe to one of those. It'll help you to be able to kind of tailor who you target, the foundations and the state and federal opportunities that you target based upon your area of focus, and help you kind of strategize around what applications you submit. So the next area we're going to talk about is the what. What is your community need and why is it important? I can't stress this enough. Your community need is the purpose for your existence. Community need equals purpose of your existence. And I sometimes have clients that will come to me and say, we are in the middle of this big capital campaign. We really need a new building. We're running out of space. We're trying to expand. So we need money to build this new building. And yes, that is a need for sure, but that's your organizational need. And so I try to have my clients think this way. What would happen to the community if you didn't exist? If a organization didn't exist anymore, what gap would be in the community? And that is what we as funders want to hear and see in the meat of your application. And we want to see that your mission is directly tied to your community need. So the first thing I challenge you to think about is, what is the problem or need that your community is facing, that the individuals that you are serving is facing, not the problem that your organization is facing. That is something you will talk about in the funding section of an application, but not in the community need or the problem that you're addressing. Second, does your mission directly address the problem or need? One of the first things I do when I have a pile of applications sitting in front of me and I have to decide which ones are going to go to the board, I start by looking at an organization's mission, because everything that you do, all of your services, all of your programs should always tie back to the mission of your organization. And if you're finding that when you look at what services you are actually providing and then you look at your mission statement and they don't directly correlate, one or two things happening. Either you need a strategic plan to realign those services with your mission, or your mission statement needs to realign with the services that you're providing. And so I look at the mission statement first, and then I go to the community need, and I make sure that if that organization is meeting the community need, and I can understand that through the mission statement, they kind of go top of the pile. But if it's really ambiguous and I'm not quite sure, in the mission statement, I'm not quite sure what this organization does, I may not go to all of the other subsections of that application. Again, this depends on the size of the foundation and how many applications are coming in for the foundation. But to give a really strong, solid application, it doesn't matter if it's a small foundation or a large foundation or a federal grant, your mission needs to be focused on the community need. So part of this application, a poll question came up, so please answer that. This part of the application, it really is the meat of your application. So it must be clear and concise. And so I recommend for those that aren't working with a grant writer internally, or it's the ED who's writing it, or maybe a program director, you might want to consider assigning a person just to this specific section that has the best written communication skills. So they may have nothing to do with grant writing, but you know they are just great at writing. And maybe it's your communications director. And just sitting down and fleshing this whole area out, because this should be the meat of your application. It's the purpose of your existence and the purpose for which you're requesting funding. So statistics, do your research. This is also the area of the application where you want to have lots of information and statistics thrown into your community need. So talk to your program staff, talk to your chief financial officers, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call government offices for accurate, up-to-date information. There's nothing more frustrating than picking up an application and seeing statistics from 2004, right? Because so much has changed, right, over the past 20 years. So much has changed even since COVID, right? And you guys all know that all nonprofits were hit in some way, shape, or form since COVID. So really trying to find statistics that are going to challenge us to understand your community need, and what is actually going on, for why we should fund your organization. So I am going to move on to a section here and give you an example. A lot of times in applications, there might be a section for a program abstract or a program summary. And this is where basically you're taking your entire, 7 to 20 page document that you are submitting to a foundation. Sometimes I recommend it be smaller than that sometimes, but you're summarizing your entire application. And this is often, if an application is asking for a project abstract or a project summary, if it is not clear and concise, they may not even look at the rest of your application. So it's important that, again, that you are getting enough information and content into this. Often they'll say 250 words, 400 characters, or something like that. So I want to give you an example of a written poorly project abstract and a written well project abstract, just to give you perspective on what kind of information they'll be looking for. So this example is Gavin's Pet Rescue. Fluffy came to Gavin's Pet Rescue cold and emaciated. After months of care and comfort, Fluffy has found a forever home. Gavin's Pet Rescue makes all the difference for uncared for and forgotten animals across Lancaster County. Funding is requested to support hundreds of companion animals looking for a second chance through the care of Gavin's Pet Rescue. Just offhand, it's well written. It doesn't sound bad. It has a few tidbits of information. But as a funder, I really don't know what Gavin's Pet Rescue does. Is it a shelter? Is it run by volunteers? Is it run out of someone's home? I really don't have a great sense of that. Using words such as after months, no concrete numbers. Is it 3 months you care for the animal? Is it 2 years you care for the animal? And what kind of care and comfort are you providing Fluffy? I have no context there. I'm left to assume a lot of things. And quite honestly, I'm not sure what the community need is here. I see that Gavin's Pet Rescue makes a difference in the community. And the one piece of information I have in this is that it's animals across Lancaster County. But again, what kind of animals? Are we talking lizards, birds, cats, dogs, horses? I have no context for that. So I'm again left to assume things. And then moving on to the funding request, funding is requested to support hundreds of companion animals looking for a second chance through the care of Gavin's Pet Rescue. Again, what is hundreds? Is that 100? Is that 500? What does that look like? And what kind of support am I actually providing? And again, what if this is a $100,000 request and I only want to give you 20? I'm not sure what that equates to. Does that equate to 10 animals that I will be serving or helping? If I have 100 applications sitting in front of me and I'm just looking at project abstracts, this application would not move forward. This abstract would not move forward. I wouldn't even glance at the budget. So let's look at a well-written project abstract. Same organization. Gavin's Pet Rescue is a no-kill animal shelter servicing Lancaster County. Currently, Lancaster County rescue shelters are at full capacity. Those abandoned each day at a shelter have 72 hours to be adopted before they're euthanized. The fact remains that each day in the US, around 4,100 dogs and cats are killed in shelters. We work to rescue, rehabilitate, and rehome companion animals. We also provide education and outreach, a sliding scale spay neuter program, animal food pantry, and other resources for pet owners in need. Gavin's Pet Rescue houses approximately 80 dogs and 50 cats annually. Funding is requested to support the spay neuter program. So as you can see, it's a little longer. So depending on your word count, you would maybe leave some information out. But there are no questions what Gavin's Pet Rescue is. It is a no-kill animal shelter. And I also have a good picture of what the actual community problem is, that all the shelters at full capacity. And because of that, animals are being euthanized within 72 hours if they're not homed. They even threw in a nice little fact, a United States statistic. The more local with your statistics you can be, the better. But this is perfectly fine to throw in a fact like that. The second half of the abstract, it talks specifically about what the Pet Rescue does. We work to rescue, rehabilitate, and rehome companion animals, likely the mission statement. And then it goes on further to tell me what other programming is available. Finally, ending with approximately how many animals they serve. And I know it's cats and dogs. And I am given an exact program that my funding would support. So again, seeing the clear difference between the two. Both of them sound lovely. They're nice to read, but one is going to move on, and that's this second project abstract into the next round of consideration. So the how. This is your creating goals and measurable outcomes. So this is a section where I often have clients that struggle as well. There may be some goals that they have organizationally as a whole, but often they're not narrow enough for their programs. And as I'm sure you guys are all aware and familiar with, sometimes you're applying for applications for specific programs and most likely not for the organization as a whole. So I'm going to challenge you to use these 5 areas of goals that I've set up to maybe sit down after this session and go through with leadership and reset some goals for each of your programs moving forward that you can use in applications. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a milestone goal. And this is a specific achievement you intend to reach by the end of your project year. It's best used to document a specific action or point in time, such as holding a meeting, completing a survey, or conducting a review. I like to use education organizations as a good example for milestone goals. So this may be the completion of an educational training opportunity you provided. Maybe you're a vocational training school and you are creating a new opportunity for training. And so your milestones might be 6 months into your project year, you've completed the curriculum development, or you're establishing 4 organizational meetings prior to the actual day of your educational training opportunity. So these are normally associated with times, months, maybe even quarters within your project year. And they tend to be things that you're definitely going to accomplish within your grant cycle year. Narrative. A narrative can be used to provide a detailed summary of overall experienced results of your project. It's a summary of a specific topic, such as the process or steps that move you towards your final goal. This is a very broad goal, and I like to have clients of mine use a narrative goal when they are working with individuals or participants that have their own individual goals. So, for instance, maybe a healthcare organization, a mental health organization, organizations that work with adults or children with special needs. There isn't going to be like a benchmark goal that all of your participants are going to hit. So in this situation, you would use a narrative goal, and you would talk about how each individual has their own goals that we work with our staff and the participant to set. And then you might give an example of a couple stories of some individual goals. For instance, I work with an organization that serves adults with intellectual disabilities. And one individual was in an art program and he was nonverbal when he came in. So his individual goal was to be able to choose the paint colors that he would want to use in his artwork. And so they were able to say 3 months into working with said organization in the art program, individual A was able to verbally communicate what colors he wanted to use for his artwork. So it's more of a storytelling, so it tends to be broader. So this is a very good goal to set for individual goals that are set for participants. Numeric. This is pretty simple. This is number-based measurements corresponding to your audience or project task. So example, serve 200 individuals. This is best used for tracking achieving specific numbers like participants or number of people reached. This is typically what awareness programs use, prevention programs, even education programming. It's the simplest to track, easiest to report. So this is a very useful goal to set for programming. The last two are percent achieved and percent changed. So percent achieved are the percentages your organization intends to reach based on proposed work. So for instance, 90% of your participants who started the program will complete the program. This is best used to track items like percentage of participants, membership, or retention rates. So this is your success rate, right? And you can kind of set up that percentage. I tell clients you're really just going to be basing this percentage off of years past in the programming, or if it's a new program that you're establishing, I ask them to kind of set it a little lower than what they would want so that you're achieving that success and then you can move that bar the next year. So an example I give is workforce development programs. So an example might be after 3 sessions of our workforce development program, 80% of participants are placed in jobs thereafter, 6 months after, or something along those lines. And finally, percent changed. So this is percentages your organization intends to impact based on proposed work. So for instance, there's an increase by 10% of individuals in Lancaster County who have been screened for colon cancer. So you're going to compare rates from before your program, and then you're going to identify what the change is going to be. So it's best used to show increase, decrease in rates, such as increase in participation rate or decrease in accident rate. Another example, this is great for mental health organization or health organizations where you are providing a service or a program and maybe you're seeing a decrease in suicide rates or anxiety or depression if you're working with youth, something along those lines. So after you have the chance to sit down and set your goals for each of your programs, you are going to want to create a measurable outcome for each goal. So these are 4 tools. Again, this is not all that you could use, but these are some of the most common. So beginning with a survey, with my new or younger clients, this is the first thing I advise them to do is to create a pre and post survey for your programming. And it's best used in community awareness programs, training times, limited programming, smaller programming, targeted populations or demographic, and knowledge retention. It's an easy resource and tool to implement within your nonprofit. It's relatively cheap. You don't even need to use a service for it, but there's tons out there on the internet. So pre and post surveys are super helpful, and you get to choose based upon the goals that you set what questions you're asking. So for instance, if you are trying to reduce stress and anxiety in youth through a mentorship program, you might ask them at the beginning, what's your stress level, 1 to 5? And then what's your stress level post-programming? And you can then track what that difference is. The next tool you could use is a formal evaluation. So these are industry focused and defined. They're commonly based on industry standards and usually nationally recognized. They're best used for qualitative and quantitative goals, measuring performances of participants in programming, accreditation processes of programming. So I highly advise if you don't have a formal evaluation of some sort in your organization to just do a little digging and just check to see, does your area of focus have some sort of industry standards? This also speaks back to your uniqueness. If you don't have an industry standard or you are using an industry standard, that's going to set you apart from all of the other applications. So I highly advise that you do a little digging, try to find some nationally recognized evaluations that you can use to show the success of your program and that you're hitting those goals that you've identified. Participant feedback. This is very similar to surveying, but this is a reaction to or an opinion about your efforts from those you are serving or those also supporting those you are serving. So from your staff or volunteers. This is best used for individualized programming, mental health, mentorships, intellectual disabilities, or disability communities, again, because they're so individualized. But this tool is used so that you can actually maybe even have quotes from individuals in your program. And sometimes funders just want to know, does the community like what you're giving them? Are they excited about your programming? Do they see success in their children or their parents or their friends that are using your services? So that's where participant feedback could be really important. And finally, software systems. This is obviously the most expensive of the 4. This is for data collection. And I have always advised all my clients that anyone that is going for state or federal dollars should have a software system of some sort to collect data. And this is outside of just tracking Excel spreadsheet stuff, using a true data collection system. This is best used for statistical data collection, output numbers. This is where you would have your percentage changed or achieved, and it's number-based information. So again, this is a goal for maybe some smaller new organizations to have a software system available to check their measurable outcomes. But it's definitely one of the easiest to then report back to your funder with minimal finagling of data. So speaking of finagling of data, here's another poll. That was a lot of information, so I'm just breaking this up for you again. Here is another answers to grant proposals if nonprofits were brutally honest. How will you evaluate this program? Because we have little funding for a formal process with an external evaluator, we will have Edward, our social work practicum student, design a self-report survey. At the beginning and the end of the program, we'll administer the survey. We'll put in lots of numbers and percentages to make it look impressive. This is not very vigorous or valid due to the selection bias, self-report bias, confounding variables, and a host of other issues, but it should be enough to convince you that we have good evaluation data. All joking aside, I know when I worked in the nonprofit world too, internally, that this was something we did, right? If we didn't have a tool set up for one of our goals and a funder wanted to get information from us, we pulled what we could and pulled all of our best reporting and resources together to create this report. And so what I'm trying to encourage you to do is to avoid doing something like this and just making sure that once you've set your goals, you've identified the measurable tool associated with that, and it'll really streamline so much for you guys in your programming. So homework, now what, after hearing this information? So some of you may be thinking, now I must rethink my mission. Now I must revisit our services because they don't tie directly to our mission. Do we even have goals for all of our programs? Now I've got to develop a system and buy some expensive data entry system to track all my goals. And ultimately, do I need a strategic plan to accomplish all this stuff? And so I want to tell you, don't panic. I'm going to show you a template that I use when I do face-to-face, in-person training, and they actually fill it out. But what the template basically says at the top of the screen is it's going to have you write down your community need. And then below that, you're going to write down your mission statement. And then you're going to answer one question. Does your mission statement relate to your community need? And if you circle no, then I would encourage you to set aside a time in a board meeting or during an executive leadership meeting to just try to tie the two of those a little bit more together. Do we need to just reword the community need in a way that makes sense for the services we're providing? Or do we need to restructure and make a whole new mission statement for our organization so that it does actually speak to the programming that we are providing? And then finally, at the bottom of the page, there are going to be 3 boxes that show 3 goals. And so a suggestion is that roughly you have 3 goals for each program. In a federal or state application, this may be larger. You may have more goals you have to set, but typically they want to know 3, at least 3. And then below those boxes, you'll have 3 more boxes that are your measurable tools that you're going to use. So it's just a way for you to put it on paper, what your goals are going to be for each program, and make sure you have a measurable tool identified for each goal. And I'll make sure you guys get that document. So what I hope you leave here with is an increased understanding of how to develop organizational goals, a clearer picture on how to measure those goals, and maybe a little bit more confidence and enthusiasm to write your next grant application in a more persuasive way. This is only just a snippet, I understand, of what is asked in an application. But I do feel these are the areas that are most important and are going to help you to be the most successful if you can clearly define them within your applications. So one last bit of humor. How will you sustain this program after this grant runs out? Answer. We will leave you alone and harass other people, continuing to spend half our time trying to convince other foundations that our programs and communities are worth being supported instead of running and improving the programs that our communities desperately need. Then after a year or so, when hopefully you forgot that we applied earlier, we'll reapply to your foundation. Please send money. So I thank you guys so much for your time. I really admire what you guys do as nonprofits in the community and all the work and the direct service care that you provide. So thank you so much. Again, my name is Katie Schock with KConsulting Services. That's my email and my phone number if you need anything.